Hi everyone, I'm TuragaNuva, and welcome to Deconstructing Bionicle. There are a number of Bionicle podcasts out there, and even more online forums and discussion threads. The Bionicle story has been talked to death at this point. But as much as I've seen said about various aspects of Bionicle's story, everything I've ever seen has been very literal, very surface level, discussing the events of the story, but not their implications. What I intend to do in this series is take a closer look at Bionicle's story. Subtext, character arcs, theming, etc. I don't know how many episodes of this I'll be able to find topics for, but you might be surprised how much meaning there is to glean from some aspects of Bionicle. Anyway, without further ado, let's get started. Today, we're looking at Takanuva's character arc, specifically in regards to lessons on moral ambiguity. To be perfectly honest, I think Takanuva has one of the most well thought out character arcs in all of Bionicle, but I feel like a lot of people overlook it. First, for the uninitiated, Takanuva was the only Toa of Light in the main Bionicle universe. He began his life as a Matoran villager named Takua, who was transformed into Takanuva upon donning the Evoki, the Kanohi Mask of Light. During Takua's time on the island of Mananui, all of the Matoran villages were under constant attack by Makuta pterodax. Note, in the early years of Bionicle, Pterodax was known simply as Makuta, but I will consistently refer to him as Pterodax in this video for clarity. Over these 1,000 years, this was Takua's only exposure to the idea of evil, the clear, unambiguous menace that was Pterodax. To the Matoran, Pterodax was more a supernatural force than an actual being with thoughts or feelings. Pterodax attacked the villagers using the very island itself, using his powers to cause natural disasters, and turning the Rahi, the island's various animal species, against the Matoran using infected masks. In addition, Takua spent those same 1,000 years listening to the tales the village elders, the Turaga, told about the heroes that would one day come to save Mananui from the threat of Makuta pterodax, the Toa. To Takua, the Toa represented the ultimate force of good. They were heroes of legend who would one day arrive and put an end to the ultimate evil that was Pterodax. So, at this point in Takua's life, good and evil are very clearly defined and completely unambiguous. The Toa heroes are the ultimate force of good who can do no wrong, while Pterodax is a force of ultimate evil. This mentality is only reinforced with the following attacks on the island by the Bo-Rock and the Rockshi. The Bo-Rock are nameless, faceless beings who don't even truly live in the same way that the Matoran do, and the Rockshi are literal embodiments of darkness who serve only the will of Pterodax. These creatures reassert in Takua's mind that evil is something clear-cut and easily recognizable, wholly distinct from forces of good like the Toa. Then Takua dons the Evoki, the Mask of Light, transforming him into not only a Toa, but a Toa diametrically opposed to Pterodax, creature of shadow, a Toa of Light. Takua, now Takanuva, faces Pterodax unafraid, knowing that he is now the ultimate good. Even when he ends up fusing together with Pterodax into a being known as TuragaNuva, Takanuva does not look too closely into Pterodax's psyche, not seeing the deeper thoughts and plans in Pterodax's mind. It's unclear how much individual control Takanuva and Pterodax had over TuragaNuva, but during its brief existence, it only took actions that Takanuva would have considered good, opening the doorway to Metru Nui for the Matoran, and saving his friend Jala's life. Takanuva, it would seem, was never forced to consider taking any actions of questionable morality, as Pterodax never attempted to take any such actions as TuragaNuva. After they separate, Pterodax disappears, and Takanuva is confident that he, the being of good and light, has vanquished the dark evil that was Pterodax. Takanuva spends a long time after this watching over Metru Nui. But then, his life changes. Attacked by a creation of the Makuta called a Shadow Leech, a portion of his light is drained away, leaving him infected with shadow. This terrifies Takanuva because he's seen what happens to beings infected with evil before. Back when he was Takua, he witnessed firsthand as Toa Lewa, under the control of one of Pterodax's infected masks, viciously fought Toa Onua. The only thing that stopped Lewa was the mask being forcibly removed. Takanuva fears that the shadow now within him will turn him completely to the side of evil, because, again, he only knows good and evil as completely separate, absolute concepts. In his mind, there is no way that he could remain good, remain himself, if the shadow within him takes hold. Still fearful of what the loss of his light will do to him, Takanuva is sent on his next journey, traveling to a series of alternate dimensions. In the first of these, he ends up in a place known as the City of Silver, where a mysterious being in the form of a floating mask tells him of a nearby village in trouble. Leaving before the mask can fully explain the situation, Takanuva finds the village and sees the trouble. A large number of smaller beings are fighting a large, monstrous creature. Takanuva quickly jumps into action, attacking the monster to protect the small, humanoid creatures. As he battles the creature, it cries out, "Wait, stop, you're wrong." But Takanuva does not hesitate, thinking, "It must be trying to trick me. I know an evil monster when I see one." This thought, while naive, makes sense in the context of Takanuva's backstory. He has been conditioned to see good and evil as black and white, and to assume that any evil attacker is something monstrous in appearance. After scaring the creature off, Takanuva is surprised when the small beings shut him out of the village, laughing. The mysterious mask has to explain to him that he has made a mistake. The village belongs to the monster species, and the one scared off by Takanuva was the only one left that had not yet been cast out by the small invaders, known as Castora. Takanuva's response is confusion. Note, by the way, that this next quote is from an early reader's picture book. Most Bionicle dialogue is a little stronger than this. "But he had sharp teeth and claws, and he was so big, and they were so little." But after the mask further explains the peaceful nature of the larger creatures, Takanuva accepts that he was wrong, fixing the situation and getting the creatures their village back. Here, Takanuva has learned his first important lesson. Good and evil are not always easy to spot. Sometimes they come in forms you might not expect. Side note, at this point, Takanuva has still never used the shadow powers he was granted by the Shadow Leech. He still fears they will corrupt him, turn him into something he's not. Next, Takanuva travels to the universe of the Kingdom, a world where Mononui, the giant robot body in which all the characters live, has died, forcing its inhabitants to migrate to the surface. However, perhaps even more surprising to Takanuva is the status of the villains of his world in this universe. The Dark Hunters, a group of killers and thieves for hire, the Vizorak, spider creatures known to take over entire islands and kill or disfigure every living thing there, the Vortex, species of the sinister Rudaka, and more, were all working alongside the Toa and Matoran, contributing to this new society. This, understandably, did not fit with Takanuva's view of the world, that all good and evil are clear-cut with no ambiguity. How could these evil beings be working alongside the forces of good? Takanuva learns another new lesson here. There can be, to an extent, degrees of good and evil. While he still believes beings are inherently one or the other, he still sees people like the Dark Hunters here as generally untrustworthy. He realizes that bad people can still perform good actions in their own self-interest, and vice versa. Takanuva quickly learns that Mononui's death in this universe was the result of the failure of Toa Matoro, who in Takanuva's universe sacrificed himself to save Mononui's life. Because of this failure, Matoro is an outcast from society, looked down on by all. Takanuva realizes the large-scale changes that a small change can cause, with one moment's hesitation being the difference between one of history's greatest heroes in his world and one of its most shunned in this one. In the end, Takanuva does see some of his biases reconfirmed. This world's Matoro, given the chance, sacrifices himself to stop Pterodax from destroying the kingdom, proving that he is still a hero, still good, at the core. It is during his time here, in the kingdom, that Takanuva first uses his newfound shadow powers, resorting to them in desperation in an attempt to stop this universe's Pterodax. In his distress over Matoro's apparent death at Pterodax's hands, he resorts to firing shadow blasts alongside his normal light ones. He is still afraid of what the shadow could do to him, but he now believes that one action does not change the core of who he is. He can briefly access these powers and still remain a good person. Takanuva's next stop, and the final alternate universe he visits, is that of the Toa Empire. He is immediately greeted by a gruff and aggressive Tahu and Kopaka, some of his most admired heroes in his world, but violent law enforcers here who consider Matoran beneath them. He wonders what could have happened in this universe. What could cause Toa heroes to act this way? He soon learns that the answer is not as complex as he might have expected. In this universe, a Toa named Tuyet used the power of an artifact called the Nui Stone to take over the world many thousands of years ago. She slowly trained the existing Toa to be the merciless law enforcers they are now, and when the Toa Mata, the Toa that Takanuva knew back on the island of Mononui, were awakened, they followed suit, behaving the same way as the other Toa in the Empire. This knowledge horrifies Takanuva and teaches him the hardest lesson to accept so far. Beings are not inherently good or evil. They can change over time based on their life and their experiences to be either. This is a lesson that Takanuva is likely only able to accept at all due to his lesson from the kingdom, that beings can act against their good or evil core. Now he realizes that there is no core. Everyone is just a living being, trying to do the best that they can, judging right and wrong based on their own life experiences. While in this universe, Takanuva begins to use his shadow powers more frequently and calmly, clearly using them with intention. We'll come back to that in a minute. In the end, Takanuva finds a rebellion and is able to defeat Tuya, escaping back to his own universe. But the knowledge he's gained has shaken him. He is no longer scared that the shadows within him will take control, forcing him to perform evil actions against his will. He's realized that he was never a perfect bastion of good. He sees that the shadow now within him is not an external evil, but is bringing out the evil impulses already within him, and that terrifies him. In response to this terror, Takanuva breaks down. Sometime after his arrival at his next stop, Kardanui, he embraces the evil within himself and lashes out at the Makuta there, threatening to kill them, even specifically referencing the non-deadly Koli match fight he once had with Pterodax, mocking his former self. Come on, this won't be some Koli match passing for a battle. Any Makuta who gets near me dies. When Toa Kopaka confronts Takanuva, telling him to remember who he is, Takanuva responds, "I know who I am. I am what they made me." He has fully accepted that the shadow is a part of him, not an external force controlling him, and has given in to it. He is only stopped by Kopaka's words. "Then you're letting them win, brother. You're admitting that you are no better than they are." This gets through to Takanuva, reminding him that no matter how much shadow is within him, he does have a choice in his actions, and making the right choice is what makes him stronger than the Makuta. Eventually, Takanuva is cured of the Shadow Leech's infection, while he simultaneously cures an infected Matoran named Gavla. However, while his reaction is jubilant, Gavla's is less so. She did not want to be cured. She explains to a stunned Takanuva, "The Makuta accepted me. They had use for me, what is more than my fellow Matoran ever did. I finally found a place where I belonged, and you took it away from me." When asked about her former friends, whom she had attacked while infected, she responds, "Friends? They were never my friends. But you wouldn't understand. You're a Toa. Every Toa is your brother or your sister." Takanuva then stops arguing with Gavla and lets her leave, because he sees himself in her. She is what he could have been, if not for friends like Kopaka to keep him motivated to do the right thing. Something I find interesting is that Takanuva's character arc in regard to moral ambiguity, as I've described it so far, seems very intentional on Greg Farshti's part. For those that don't know, Greg Farshti was the main writer for the Bionicle story, authoring most of the chapter books, all of the comics and online podcasts and serials, and some extra story material here and there. However, he did not have the final say when it came to the major events of the story. That was the job of the story team. The place where Greg had the most control over what he wrote was in the story serials and podcasts posted to BionicleStory.com, or available through Bionicle.com's Kanoka Club. These smaller stories often focused on side characters and events not crucial to the main story, so Greg had much more freedom in what he could include in them. The reason I bring all this up is because some of the most significant parts of Takanuva's arc, specifically his journeys to the Kingdom universe and the Toa Empire universe, happened in these types of online serials, and so were likely entirely Greg's creation. Greg has also specifically stated that the picture book, Journey of Takanuva, where Takanuva visited the City of Silver, takes place before his trips to the Kingdom and the Toa Empire, despite the picture book's art showing Takanuva with weapons he obtained in the Kingdom. The decision to place Journey of Takanuva here shows that Greg wrote this series of events very intentionally, choosing to ask fans to ignore art inconsistencies, rather than place this book later where it would ruin Takanuva's character progression. Unfortunately, with Bionicle's cancellation, Takanuva was never able to achieve his destiny and wrap up his story. However, Greg Farshti stated in a Q&A that Takanuva's destiny would involve a war among the great beings, the ones who originally created the Motonui robot and all of its inhabitants. Quote, My plan was to have him play a major role in a great being's civil war between Velika and like-minded followers who felt the great beings should dominate Spherus Magna directly, and other great beings that wanted no interference with the society at all. He also specifies that this was his own personal plan for the character, not something the story team had decided. That assumed that the story team did not have other plans for the character, but if they did not, that was my intention for him. As we discussed earlier, evidence suggests that Takanuva's series of lessons on morality were mostly something Greg planned on his own, separate from the story team. So if he had plans for Takanuva's final destiny, which weren't decided by the story team, they almost certainly would have been a conclusion to the character arc Greg had constructed thus far. So here's where we get into some speculation. To serve as the perfect culmination of Takanuva's character journey, the Great Being War would have been his final lesson in morality. It would have had no one completely in the wrong or right. Throughout all of Takanuva's journeys and all of the lessons he's learned, every conflict has still had a clear villain. The Kestora in the City of Silver, Pterodax in the Kingdom, and Tuya in the Toa Empire. But in the war between the Great Beings, their dispute would arise from them all having conflicting, but ultimately valid, views. There would be no villain. Then, using the knowledge he's gained from his various adventures, Takanuva would not defeat anyone, but would use his powers to bring the Great Beings to an agreement. You see, Takanuva's powers, or at least those of his mask, don't only include manipulating physical light. He also has the ability to shed figurative light, bringing understanding and acceptance to people's minds. This power was never used by Takanuva in the entire Bionicle story because he wasn't ready to use it. In all of his adventures, no foe could be defeated through understanding and acceptance. They were all too far gone. But now, he has learned that no being is truly good or evil. It is this realization that would have prompted Takanuva to use his mask's powers as he ever had before, to settle a conflict not by determining who is in the wrong and stopping them, but by helping the great beings to see that none of them are completely in the wrong. Takanuva's character arc, overall, is about lessons in moral ambiguity. Takua was originally a Matoran who believed only in pure good stopping absolute evil. But as Takanuva, he would eventually become a hero who understood that things are almost never black and white. Takanuva being a Toa of Light was not special because he could control physical light, but because it gave him the power to encourage acceptance and understanding. So, I hope you all enjoyed the first episode of Deconstructing Bionicle. If you did, I'd love it if you'd click the like button. If there's anything you'd like to see me discuss on the show in the future, let me know in the comments. I've already got ideas for a couple more episodes, so consider subscribing to get notified of those when they come out. Also, if you're interested in reading or rereading any of the books and serials I've referenced, check out Biological Chronicle, a complete collection of the entire Bionicle story, linked in the description. Thanks everyone.